Greetings and welcome to another edition of Montpelier Connection. I'm State Representative Mike Mrowicki from the Wyndham 4 district that is now Putney and Dummerston. And we're here today to look back at the last legislative session, to look at the COVID sessions, as we call them, and to share a little bit with former Representative Kitty Toll. Welcome, Kitty.
It's very nice to be here with you, Mike. Thank you for having me.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time. We have just concluded what we call the historic COVID sessions, where COVID's changed everything. It created a new landscape. It was the priority, the lens through which we saw everything. And when you were chairing the House Appropriations Committee, what were some of the things that seemed the most daunting to you as we started to basically have to start with a clean sheet and try to make things happen from the Appropriations Committee and I should add that the governor starts the budget with a proposal, but it's really the heavy lifting goes on in the House, and then we send it over to the Senate and they do their 50,000-foot look, and we get to do the heavy lifting though.
Well, thank you, Mike, for that. The budget process is an interesting one, and as you said, the governor does start off with his proposed budget, and then it moves to the House, and then it moves on to the Senate, and ultimately is decided in a committee of conference between the House and the Senate. COVID changed so much of the work that we did. We still had to complete the budget. We had to make sure that it was balanced. But the last year when I was there and the speaker called for a recess in the legislature because of COVID, I can clearly remember it was Friday, March 13th. And I was sitting at my desk and we were in the thick of getting the budget out and working on proposals with the policy committees. And I can remember writing a long list so that when I returned the next week, I would know exactly where we left off, what I was thinking, what directions we were going in. And never, ever in my wildest dreams would I have anticipated that I would not step foot back in that room or even in the State House as chair of House Appropriations. We did not return, as you know, for quite some time, and then it went well into the next session. Working remotely is very different. We were able to get the work done, but it's very different, you know, from running down the halls and having a conversation with policy committees and other chairs and advocates and Vermonters outside the committee room door. It just changed the entire landscape of how we would proceed.
Yeah, I found it to be one-dimensional, which meant for me, we got the work done, but I don't think it was fully formed as it would have been if we had been in person.
I would agree with you because here in Vermont, Vermonters have access to all their public officials, and we learn so much about what is going on in the lives of Vermonters by, you know, those who call in, those who come to the State House, those who work through others, you know, to get messages to us and to help us get a deep understanding. I have to say the speaker, Vermont was one of the first states to get online and get running and to finish the work of the legislature. And I do give lots of kudos to the speaker and the leadership team for allowing us to move so quickly into a remote environment to get our work done.
Yes, well, certainly agree with that, and our amazing staff too at the ground level.
Yes, of course. Yes, our staff
who did and continue to do amazing work. And I would say my hat's off to you. Things felt chaotic. So it was essential to have someone like you who exuded this calm confidence that we were going to get through this, and somewhat continues today, where it's essential that we have people who can bring people together, calm things down, so we focus on the work we've done. So I appreciate the way you were able to provide that leadership. And I'm going to move into some current events here now, because the news has certainly been ripe with lots of headlines that are somewhat distressing, except for the fact that we're here in Vermont. And it's usually when I go out of state, it doesn't take long before I realize, well, here's another Vermont appreciation trip. And then we get
I
back.
would agree. I would agree.
Um, but let's start with the Supreme Court ruling on Roe v. Wade, the Dobbs decision, as it's being called now. I think a lot of us were surprised but not shocked, because the way the Supreme Court has been stacked, and the machinations that Mitch McConnell used to not to let Merrick Garland have a hearing, and then rush through Justice Barrett, were disappointing. What were your thoughts when you first heard that decision?
It just felt like a rawness in the pit of my stomach. I knew it was coming, as we all knew it was coming, but there was some hope. I just had some hope that the information that had leaked out of the Supreme Court was inaccurate or would have been changed. I was hopeful for that, but intellectually I knew better. But still, when I actually heard the news, it hit like a ton of bricks. I don't think there was any preparing for it.
Yeah, no, and I think many of us also felt somewhat of a betrayal, because the last three justices, when they were asked about this, it's hard to take this in, but it would appear that they weren't telling the truth.
When there were several comments about it being settled law, I wasn't happy with the choices, obviously, but I had confidence in that testimony, and we have heard senators who are very unhappy with what they thought they were hearing and what they did hear and what the ultimate outcome was. And I do feel it was a betrayal.
Yeah, yep. Senator Collins of Maine has certainly shared her experience with Justice Kavanaugh, where he reassured her he's a team player, he doesn't rock the boat. And it certainly feels like he was not telling the truth at the time.
And being a woman, though, I think we had to be even more cautious of our decisions going forward, because this has to do with terminations of pregnancy. It has to do with abortion, but it also has to do with fundamental health care for women, safety for women. And, it just feels like we have been, repressed once again and put back into a time that I never wanted to return to. And I fear that I have two daughters. I fear for what's ahead for both of them.
Sure. And I have three and a granddaughter, and fortunately they're in New England, but you don't have to go far to hear stories. And a story I've heard is somebody who miscarried at 16 weeks and wondered, would I have been able to get services if I lived in Texas, or would I just bleed out?
It's a frightening time. And, we in the news, I'm sure Vermont is going to be inundated with outside sources, but, since we're passing Prop 5, it will be on the ballot in November for approval. And I'm sure there will be outside influences bringing the scariest, darkest information. I truly have great faith in our medical professionals. I believe in a strong relationship between a woman and her doctor. These are very difficult, emotional decisions that need to be made, and women do not take them lightly. And I do not believe these are political decisions or decisions that should be made by others. They really need to be in the hands of professional medical doctors who understand the circumstances, the viability of the pregnancy, the risk to the mother, maybe the tragic circumstances in which someone is pregnant. And there's so much more to consider. It is not a black and white yes or no issue, and it's certainly not a political issue.
No, not at all. Not at all. And so you mentioned Prop 5. You want to give us a little background, because the process started 4 years ago.
and I was very happy I was in the House to be, a part of that process and to take those critical votes. There have been, we take over 12 years. I'm sure there's thousands of votes that I have taken. There are a handful that go right to the heart, and all votes are very important. And I'm not saying others are not important, but when I voted for marriage equality, that was such an important vote for me. And voting for Proposition 5 was such an important vote for me. At the time, I knew it was a safety measure for Vermont in case anything ever were to happen in the future, but I really didn't believe we would be where we are now. And so I'm glad Vermont has taken those steps, and we know our process is good. It happens over 2 bienniums, so it's just not one group of legislators that are making this change, this proposal to change the Constitution. It has to happen over 2 different bienniums with 2 different elected groups of legislators. And so we have a good process in Vermont. It's a democratic process, and I am happy to, and I am relieved and happy to see Proposition 5 on our ballot for November.
Yeah,
But I'm about the outside influences that are going to come in and tell dark, distorted stories.
yes, that misinformation is something we need to be ready to counter, and I think it's especially obvious here that this is an exercise in democracy. We have taken the steps over the last 4 years to express the will of the people. And that's one of the most distressing pieces of these Supreme Court renderings, is that this is not close to the will of the people. And I know there are times where, such as with racial justice, where the Supreme Court has made decisions that eventually became the will of the people, but they took some leadership. But this is a case where they are so far out of touch with the people, it's made the Supreme Court just seem like a political arm of the Republican Party, or the right wing of the Republican Party. Because as we've seen with our governor, and I give him credit for this, he's one of those Republicans who hasn't gone along with this. And I think there are many more, but they are also being silenced. So,
and I commend him for stepping out and making public commentary.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of Republican governors across the country that are taking the stands that our governor is taking. And for those actions, I am very complimentary and his braveness of doing so.
Yeah, I would agree. He deserves credit. The Supreme Court also rendered a decision on gun safety that some of us are saying makes us even less safe, especially in light of the spate of gun violence we see across the country. And the Supreme Court just took some of the regulations, the well-regulated rules that prevent some people from getting guns who many of us think shouldn't. Again, we're in Vermont. We've made some good progress on gun safety and keeping the firearms away from people that shouldn't have it. Do you have thoughts about gun safety and what we need to do in Vermont?
I do, and I've thought a lot about it, and it's personal to me. I was a school teacher for 14 years. And when, the last shooting in Uvalde, I look at my young nieces and nephews who are all elementary school aged. And when I see a 10-year-old, I can put a face, I can just put a face to those children in Uvalde. And I think about the students that I had and how I was, how I would be prepared, or I was not prepared for anything like that to happen during the 14 years when I was teaching. I'm very concerned with the environment, changing the environment in our schools. It has to be an academic, social, open, warm, comforting environment, and we cannot turn our schools into prisons. That is not conducive to good learning and to, really broaden the minds of young kids. Education is the future for our democracy, for our country, and turning it into a prison-like atmosphere really concerns me. I was on a radio show and someone called in about, the necessity or talked about teachers being armed. And I, for myself, think how close I worked with students. I knelt down beside them. I was on the playground with them. I was sitting close in a chair, to work one-on-one or in small groups. And to have a firearm attached to my hip is the most foreign thing and dangerous thing that I can possibly think of. I am pleased with what we have done in Vermont. We have moved forward with some, firearm safety, and it is safety. I live in the Northeast Kingdom. I fully understand the hunting culture in Vermont, and I'm talking about safety precautions. And we have moved ahead, but I think we can do more to ensure and enforce safe storage. And I find it absolutely unbelievable that when assault weapons, when the ban was lifted, when the sunset happened, there were about 400,000 assault rifles in this country. And today it's estimated there's over 20 million. Those are just numbers that make no sense to me.
No, and those are not hunting weapons. Those are weapons of war.
They're weapons of war for killing people.
Yeah. And more guns is not the answer to this question. And it's a bigger question than we can take on in a few minutes, but I appreciate your concerns and the idea that we have more to do here. So
and concealing guns is not the answer either with
no.
the decision.
No, and I'm actually in regards to assault rifles, we are an open carry state, but I think that goes to hunting, and I don't think there's any place for assault rifles, and I'm going to be introducing a bill that would stop the practice of open carry of assault rifles. I don't think there's any place in Vermont for them. If people want to have that in their home for their protection, that's a completely different thing as to be parading around with an assault rifle. Along with that, we've got some big concerns as well, and climate is one of them that I'd like to address here. We understand that climate is real, it's here, it's affecting us. I know with gardening season here, we were talking about how just 40 years ago, you could pretty much expect that you wait until the end of May to put your gardening in, and probably mid-September, you'd get a killing frost.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, we didn't get frosted until the first week of November. That's just in 40 years. And this is just a small piece of it, but our climate is changing, and we need to keep changing. Vermont has to change as well. What are the kinds of things you'd like to see done?
We know our climate is changing, and we see it with our maple sugaring season, which is coming far earlier. And we also see it, the ski industry is feeling it. It's very different. Winters are very different from when I was a kid and from when my parents were younger. And we have to make sure that there's an understanding between weather events and climate change, because weather events still happen, but climate change is the broad change over a long period of time. Here in Vermont, we know our emissions mostly come from transportation, and also from, we need to weatherize our homes because of home heating. Those are where our two emissions are coming from, over 70%. I think that we're moving ahead on those issues, but we need to keep moving. I was sorry to see the veto of the clean heat standard. If that wasn't the answer, we needed another plan in place. And so when that veto happened, I was looking for the plan. If we're not going to do this, then what are we going to do? Because we will likely meet our 2025 goals for reaching the reduction of emissions. 2030 and 2050 become much more aggressive, and we need to be doing that work now. And taking that off the table means now we're falling a year or two behind getting something established and working. But in the meantime, until the legislature can, and if the legislature and the governor does not act, we know the state of Vermont still has to act. So that does fall upon groups to act in order to make changes to meet those emission reductions. But we need to continue with subsidies. an encouragement of electrification of vehicles and getting charging stations out everywhere to ensure fast charging stations that people can use electric vehicles and use them with security and ensure that they can get to where they need to be with charges. And we need to continue with weatherization projects. And I know a lot of federal money went into weatherization projects this last year, which was wonderful. But getting all that money out the door is going to be a challenge because of the lack of construction workers, contractors, and building materials. They're hard to get. You know, the supply is short. And so reaching these goals are going to be very tough, even though our initiatives are there and we're ready to act. We have barriers in the way. So I am hoping if there's any timeframes on those dollars, that extensions are given by the federal government, because we have the work and we know the work, but we may not be able to use it all at no fault of our own.
Yeah, no, that's a good point to bring up here. We've only got a few minutes left, but I also wanted to touch on another proposal that will be on the ballot in November, and that's Proposal 2, clarifying the language in our Constitution around slavery. Now, racial and social justice has been a headline for several years now, most especially since the very public murders of Black individuals and the concerns around how people of color are treated in Vermont has become an issue that we've had to deal with. And this Prop 2 is an indicator that we are trying to address this. And I wonder if you could share a little bit about your concerns with racial justice here in Vermont.
Proposition 2, I was there for that initial vote because that fell over to bienniums as well. And those the changes in our Constitution were needed, and it's very important. And I'm very hopeful. I'm sure that this will pass in November, and I'm glad to see that on the ballot. This past year, the legislature moved forward with initiatives that had started on you move forward with truth and reconciliation, and you move forward with environmental justice, ensuring that all people have a voice in democracy and have access to government and have access to clean water, clean food, clean air, and that these are just not available to an elite few or to certain groups of people. And so I really applaud the efforts of the legislature moving forward, the commission that will interview people and understand policy and start researching policy that needs to be changed or new policy that needs to be passed to address these issues of equity and inclusion and just fairness for everyone. But everyone needs a voice, an active voice in the democratic process and access to democracy. And I feel the work, especially this last session, is going to move that process faster, and we all need to be on that train and embrace it and help to move forward so that we are all Vermonters first.
Yeah, well said. I think Vermont's changing. The face of the nation, the face of Vermont is changing, and we would do well to be more welcoming and inclusive, and we've got some work to do there. So I appreciate your take on that, because it's something that it's not just for a few people to take this work on, but all Vermonters to try and understand the perspective of our BIPOC Vermonters. Anything else you want to share with viewers out there? I understand that we're moving forward. The primary elections are getting close, and people might not know you, but anything else you want them to know about you, or some issues that are vital to what you would like to do and see Vermont tackle?
Certainly, and as a candidate for Lieutenant Governor, and not just because I'm a candidate, everyone needs to vote this year. There is so much on the line. The Vermont primary is August 9, but the good news is early voting has already started here in Vermont. Our Secretary of State's office has really opened up the process for access to voting. And that is wonderful. It's a model all states should be following. So go to your town clerk's office or go online to the Secretary of State's office and request a ballot. You can go vote in person and leave it there right now if you happen to be near your town clerk's office. So voting has started for the primary, and we all need to be encouraging our friends, our neighbors, all of our relatives to vote. We need to exercise our right to vote. I feel democracy is fragile. I feel the very foundation of it is being chipped away. And in order to secure our democracy, we all need to get out and vote.
Yeah, well said. Democracy only works if we participate.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, Kitty, thank you so much for taking this time, and good luck. And we hope to be seeing more of you.
Thank you, Mike. I enjoyed your show, and thank you for having me.
Okay, take care. And thanks to you out there and all the people at BCTV for helping bring more of the work we do in Montpelier and around the state to voters here in Windham County. Until next time, I'm Mike Mrowicki. Take care. Bye-bye.